To whom do I owe the most love? Should I love myself more than any other? Or should I love another before the rest? Or do I owe every single person the same amount of love? If my love springs from my emotions, then those who give me the greatest feelings of joy would be the most deserving of my love. But what if love is not born from the individual, but rather the bonds between people? What if love is the mortar that holds us together, that makes communities stronger than any one person could be on their own? Then love should be spread to all, with friend, foe, and self receiving an equal share. Would that not lead to this world being the best place for each and every soul here? What greater power could love have than to lead us to a paradise where all humanity is united, where the suffering of anyone would be snuffed out by the infinite compassion of every single person who crosses their path? These are difficult questions to answer, undoubtedly, and they are the focus of the film The Last Temptation of Christ, directed by Martin Scorsese in 1988. The screenplay was adapted by Paul Schrader from a 1955 novel of the same name, written by Nikos Kazantzakis. The story takes place in a time of great strife and confusion. The Roman Empire, under Octavian and Tiberius Caesar, both better known by the title Augustus, was expanding to bring all of the lands surrounding the Mediterranean under one rule. But in this movie, the Roman Empire is a metaphor for the ultimate abandonment of love. It represents the resignation that inequity is inescapable, so the best that one could hope for is to move as high as one can in the social ladder. The hero of this story is Jesus of Nazareth. He is racked with pain because he can see a much better world than this. He can see the poison in the souls of those around him as they languish serving this narcissistic empire. But he is not without conflict. He feels the desires of his body, which moves him to find relief, pleasure, and contentment with his life. He even seeks to rid himself of this burden that his duty brings by complying with the demands of the Romans. He works as a carpenter, fulfilling his obligations to the empire by making crosses they will use to crucify traitorous seditionaries. He hopes this will rid him of his compassion, so he could give up the seemingly impossible task of usurping the authority of the world's most powerful government with the preaching of one pacifist. But his need to help others only grows with being confronted by this cruelty face to face. The desires of his spirit overwhelm him, the desire to see all who suffer be healed, for the bounty of camaraderie to bring peace on earth. His path is not easy. In fact, at times it seems oxymoronic. He preaches love, yet the world is being overtaken by powerful forces that create injustice. If he knows that he must love his neighbor and even his enemy as much as himself, how could he stray from the acceptance of the cruel current state of this land? That is precisely the conflict that he has with Judas, his first and closest disciple. Judas is a zealot who seeks to liberate the Israelites from the tyranny of Rome. He pleads with Jesus to liberate their bodies before their souls, stating that their people cannot be saved by faith alone. But Jesus tells him that if the needs of the flesh are to reign supreme, that the Romans will be but one master of many, to be replaced with another mundane force. Only by winning the battle for the souls of the people can a new way of life begin, where all love one another, and so there would be no transgressions against others even in our wishes, much less our actions. But this absolute commitment to the love of all, of refusing to have any form of subordination, is a steep price for Jesus to pay. This is made most clear through his relationship with Mary Magdalene. She alludes to their time spent together as children and the strong personal bond they shared. Now that they are both adults, she feels abandoned by him, because while he does love her, he doesn't love her more than anyone else, nor does he want her to love him more than anyone else. She does not share his commitment to the betterment of all, and in her lonely despair, she becomes a courtesan. He is deeply troubled by the path that she goes down, but cannot fulfill her needs, and hopes that she will forgive him for not bringing them closer together. She does not offer him forgiveness, but he does not forsake her for it. When their village attacks her, stoning her for her lewd profession, he protects her. While her assailants claim their moral superiority, their righteousness for meting out what they call justice, he shows them the truth. They are each imperfect creatures too, and they only want this act of violence against Mary to delude themselves into forgetting their own flawed nature. Jesus acknowledges his own flaws. After saving Mary, he admits the temptation he had to strike those men down, but his compulsion to be better than that stayed his hand, and in a heroic display of humility, he resents the pride that he feels from doing the right thing. He even admits to desiring Mary and other women, but as a vessel of peace and love, he cannot bring himself to do any of those things. He could have been portrayed as an aromantic person, but his personal connection with Mary shows that this is a sacrifice that he makes. He could have been shown as an asexual person, but the allure of intimacy is a real struggle that he overcomes. He understands the great power that the need for family has on the will, and he knows the pain that comes from abandoning personal fulfillment because he has lived through that pain himself. But he knows that for a better way of life to begin, he cannot succumb to his own needs. His love of every living thing means that he must strive far past any of those immediate, palpable desires. And his striving brings him and his disciples to Jerusalem, with its statue of Caesar signifying its corruption. He brings about a great ruckus, preaching against the established order of commerce as a path to personal salvation from strife. He knows that this will make him an enemy of the state, and pleads with Judas to lead the Romans to him. He wishes to martyr himself, showing the world by example that if each of us were willing to give everything, including our lives, until love of all people were to be the sole governance on earth, then and only then could a perfect world be achieved. And it is so. Judas does lead the soldiers to him, and he is brought before Pontius Pilate to be judged. He holds strong to his convictions, despite Pilate insisting that many have come before him, and many will come after him, and will be destroyed for impeding Rome's progress. As he is corporally punished, being crucified himself, he cries out, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" And then all goes quiet, and he is given a long and powerful vision. As the spiteful cries of the crowd are silenced, he sees a young girl at the foot of his cross. She tells him that he has been a devout and pious man all of his life, and he deserves an end to his torment. She takes out the nails of his cross, and she walks him down the hill of Golgotha. She shows him the rich bounty of earth, and tells him that he can and should take Mary Magdalene as his wife. They attempt to start a family, and though she carries his child, she and the unborn child are taken away from him by a twist of fate. In his despair, the girl tells him that he should wed again. He marries 2 women and has children with them while growing old. One day he sees a preacher, a man who has taken the name of Saul. He tells the crowd of his past as a killer, and how one day he was struck by a blinding light, a vision of Jesus. He says that Jesus was a man conceived of a union between a mortal human woman and an otherworldly entity who had created all known existence. He says that Jesus was killed on the cross, but was resurrected 3 days later, and that all the world needs to accept his divinity and follow his path to salvation. Jesus takes Saul aside, condemning these lies about his life, but Saul dismisses him. Saul says that the belief in what he is saying will raise these people up out of the squalor and misery of their lives, that they will build a better world because of the heroic example that Jesus has set. Jesus is offended and returns to his family. But the necessity of this revolution against the Romans becomes clear as soon all of Jerusalem is red with the fire of genocidal oppression. As Jesus lays under the red sky, dying of old age, he is visited by his old disciples. They express their deep sorrow and resentment for his choice to live on, to no longer be a martyr. They expose the girl as an agent of self-indulgence, and so accepting her offer of mercy was undoing all the great work he had done and would continue to do long after his death. So he crawls out of his home, stretching his arms out to the sky, wishing away all the comfort he had been given, wishing it to be replaced with the sour pain of suffering so that others might learn to love. And so the vision ends. He is back on the cross, bleeding away the last moments of his life. He is thankful that he might bear this punishment, so that others might prosper from the movement that he is setting into motion. He dies, smiling, having struggled with, but having overcome, the last temptation of Christ.